Hello, we are in lesson 7 of the Giver, and you were told to read chapter 6 and to read chapter 7, and you did need to write that 3-2-1 independent reading for each chapter, and I hope that you submitted that. If you haven't, you need to do that so that I can check it and read it, look at your summary and see what you find interesting. What are your questions? What stood out? If we're in the classroom, we'll have a chance to go over it. But because time is of the essence, I'm going to go into the Learn Zillion slide card number 6. Again, this is Learn Zillion lesson 7. Card 6, and it says, follow along as I read the beginning of chapter 8 of the Giver. The audience was clearly ill at ease. I hope that y'all have read 7. They applauded at the final assignment, but the applause was piecemeal. No longer a crescendo of united enthusiasm. There were murmurs of confusion. Jonas moved his hands together, clapping, but it was an automatic, meaningless gesture that he wasn't even aware of. His mind had shut out all of the earlier emotions, the anticipation, excitement. Remember? All of those feelings that he was trying to explain in his mind and even understand. Anticipation, excitement, pride, and even the happy kinship with his friends. Now he felt only humiliation and terror. Because if you didn't know, he's number 19. He's sitting there with his class, with his group, his age group, and he got skipped. He was not assigned. Everyone else was assigned. And that's why he's feeling what he's feeling. So, that's not good. The chief elder waited until the uneasy applause subsided. Then she spoke again. I know, she said in her vibrant, gracious voice, that you are all concerned, that you feel I have made a mistake. She smiled. The community, relieved from its discomfort very slightly by her benign statement, seemed to breathe more easily. It was very silent. Jonas looked up. I have caused you anxiety. She said, I apologize to my community. Her voice flowed over the assembled crowd. We accept your apology, they all uttered together. Jonas, she said, looking down at him, I apologize to you in particular. I caused you anguish. I accept your apology, Jonas replied shakily. Please come to the stage now. Earlier that day, dressing in his own dwelling, he had practiced the kind of jaunty, self-assured walk that he hoped he could make to the stage when his turn came. All of that was forgotten now. He simply willed himself to stand, to move his feet that felt weighted and clumsy, to go forward up the steps and across the platform until he stood at her side. Reassuringly, she placed her arm across his tense shoulders. Jonas has not been assigned, she informed the crowd, and his heart sank. Then she went on. Jonas has been selected. He blinked. What did that mean? He felt a collective questioning stir from the audience. They too were puzzled. In a firm, commanding voice, she announced, Jonas has been selected to be our next receiver of memory. Then he heard the gasp, the sudden intake of breath, drawn sharply in astonishment by each of the seated citizens. He saw their faces, their eyes widen in awe. It just naturally happens when you're not expecting something. And still, he did not understand. Such a selection is very, very rare. The chief elder told the audience, our community has only one receiver. It is he who trains his successor. We have had our current receiver for a very long time. She went on. Jonas followed her eyes and saw that she was looking at one of the elders. The committee of elders was sitting together in a group, and the chief elder's eyes were now on one who sat in the midst, but seemed oddly separate from them. It was a man Jonas had never noticed before, a bearded man with pale eyes. He was watching Jonas intently. Now let's go back. A bearded man with pale eyes. He was watching Jonas intently. We failed in our last selection. I'm on page 76. We failed in our last selection, the chief elder said solemnly. It was 10 years ago when Jonas was just a toddler. I will not dwell on the experience because it causes us all terrible discomfort. Jonas didn't know what she was referring to, but he could sense the discomfort of the audience. They shifted uneasily in their seats. We have not been hasty this time, she continued. We could not afford another failure. Okay. So what does Jonas's heart do when he hears he was not assigned? It just about falls out of his chest on it. How does the community react when the previous receiver is mentioned? They just kind of, it's uneasy, isn't it? It's not a pleasant experience. It was not a pleasant experience. Something must have went down that Jonas has no idea of what. How does the crowd react and what does this suggest? So that's what I just said. They're moving in their seats and, we can tell that there's an uneasiness there. But I'm gonna just say, for Jonas, now it all makes sense as far as we don't really know what he's getting involved in just yet. We're going to know. We're about to jump into that. But to say even make this statement, he was not assigned. It's not just an assignment. That this position that Jonas was given has been offered. I mean, it definitely implies how special it is because he's been selected. He's been selected. Yeah. After careful consideration, too. So, go to your questions. Question number 7 is what we need to look at. And the question is, describe Jonas's reaction to being selected as receiver of memory. And then describe the community's reaction. And what does this suggest about this role? He blinked. What did that mean? He felt a collective questioning stir from the audience. I mean, Jonas is in shock. Jonas did not see this coming. He wasn't going, yeah, got it, ooh. You know, and he also didn't go, oh, man, really? You know, I mean, he didn't have that woohoo, and he didn't have that, like, shucks, really? Ugh. You know, it was, he couldn't process it. And he really don't understand what he's been assigned. Not yet. Which is really, really interesting, because if you're told you're a nurturer, you know, you got assigned to be a nurturer, you know what that is. You know, his friend, you know, got a really good assignment in the last chapter to be the assistant director of recreational, you know, the recreation director, and how fitting is that for Jonas? You know, that just was great. And his friend, the caretaker of the old, that just, like, she knows what that means. You know, this assignment, like, you know, it's not talked about. Okay? So this is a big deal. A big deal. This is not some small thing. All right. What is the meaning of the word hasty in the sentence below, and what does this suggest about the previous receiver of memory? This is number 8. Use context from the text to support your answer. And it says, this is part of the question. We have not been hasty this time, she continued. We could not afford another failure, which is where I left off on page 77. What is the meaning of the word hasty based on what I've read? But I had to go back to answer that. You know, we have not been hasty this time. We could not afford another failure. If I'm just looking at that, I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't enough, to be honest. I mean, I know what it means personally, yeah, you know, but we have not been hasty this time. So it is enough, honestly. Yeah, it is. It's enough. It's enough information here to make sense of what it means. It is. It is. But there's also information ahead and reading prior that also I'll refer to. Think about it. We have not been hasty this time. So what does that imply? If you haven't been hasty this time, then what was you before? Hasty. Okay? Now, we could not afford another failure. So if you were hasty before, then, and it says we couldn't afford another failure, then that must have ended with a failure. So we don't want another failure, so we're not going to be hasty. Exactly. That's what that means. Okay? And to even go back to the text on the previous page at the bottom of 76, we failed in our last selection when they were trying to choose another receiver of memory before, but previous to this, prior to this, the chief elder said solemnly, it was 10 years ago when Jonas was just a toddler. I will not dwell on the experience because it causes us all terrible discomfort. But 10 years ago, they had tried to do the same thing. They had tried to choose someone, okay? And evidently that was a hasty decision, and they must not have thought it through. This also implies, because it took them so long, that they've really thought this through with Jonas. So how exciting is that? I think Jonas is going to have his work cut out for him. Now, follow along as I continue reading chapter 8 of The Giver. That's what card 8 of 11 says. And if you will, we'll pick up on page 77. Sometimes, she went on, speaking now in a lighter tone, relaxing the tension in the auditorium. We are not entirely certain about the assignments, because here's the thing. What did we say about a utopia? There's no perfect place other than heaven, right? On earth, there's not a perfect place because we're not a perfect people. Nobody's perfect. She's not perfect. Boom. We're not perfect. But, yeah. Sometimes, she went on, speaking now in a lighter tone, relaxing the tension in the auditorium. We're not entirely certain about the assignments, even after the most painstaking observations. Sometimes we worry that the one assigned might not develop through training every attribute necessary. 11s are still children after all. What we observe as playfulness and patience, the requirements to become nurturer, could with maturity be revealed as simply foolishness and indolence. So we continue to observe during training and to modify behavior when necessary. Modify means, to change. But the receiver in training cannot be observed, cannot be modified or changed. That is stated quite clearly in the rules. Again, that's one of those phrases that is repeated in this text. He is to be alone, apart, while he is prepared for by the current receiver for the job, which is the most honored in our community. What? This Jonas has just been selected to hold the most honored position in the community. Alone, apart, Jonas listened with increasing unease. Therefore, the selection must be sound. It must be a unanimous choice of the committee. They can have no doubts, however fleeting. If during the process an elder reports a dream of uncertainty, the dream has the power to set a candidate aside instantly. Jonas was identified as a possible receiver many years ago. We have observed him meticulously. There was no dream of uncertainty. He has shown all of the qualities that a receiver must have. With her hand still firmly on his shoulder, the chief elder listed the qualities. Intelligence, she said. We are all aware that Jonas has been a top student throughout his school days. Integrity, she said next. Jonas has, like all of us, committed minor transgressions. She smiled at him. We expect that. We hoped also that he would present himself promptly for chastisement, and he has always done so. Courage, she went on. Only one of us here today has ever undergone the rigorous training required of a receiver. He, of course, is the most important member of the committee, the current receiver. It is he who reminded us again and again of the courage required. Jonas, she said, turning to him, but speaking in a voice that the entire community could hear, the training required of you involves pain, physical pain. He felt fear flutter within him. You've never experienced that. Yes, you have scraped your knees and falls from your bicycle. Yes, you crushed your finger in a door last year. Jonas nodded, agreeing as he recalled the incident and its accompanying misery. But you will be faced now, she explained gently, with pain of a gratitude that none of us here can comprehend, because it's beyond our experience. The receiver himself was not able to describe it, only to remind us that you would be faced with it, that you would need immense, immense, immense courage. We cannot prepare you for that. But we feel certain that you are brave, she said to him. He did not feel brave at all, not now. The fourth essential attribute, so let's say the first three: intelligence, integrity, courage. Number 4, wisdom. The fourth essential attribute, the chief elder said, is wisdom. Jonas has not yet acquired that. The acquisition of wisdom will come through his training. We are convinced that Jonas has the ability to acquire wisdom. That is what we looked for. Finally, the receiver must have one more quality, and it is one which I can only name but not describe. I do not understand it. You members of the community will not understand it either. Perhaps Jonas will, because the current receiver has told us that Jonas already has this quality. He calls it the capacity to see beyond. The chief elder looked at Jonas with a question in her eyes. The audience watched him too. They were silent. For a moment he froze, consumed with despair. He didn't have it. Whatever she had said, he didn't know what it was. Now was the moment when he would have to confess, to say, no, I don't, I can't. And throw himself on the mercy, ask for forgiveness. Throw himself on the mercy, ask forgiveness, to explain that he had been wrongly chosen, that he was not the right one at all. But when he looked out across the crowd, the sea of faces, the thing happened again. The thing that had happened with the apple. They changed. He blinked, and it was gone. His shoulders straightened slightly. Briefly, he felt a tiny sliver of sureness for the first time. She was still watching him. They all were. I think it's true, he told the chief elder and the community. I don't understand it yet. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I see something, and maybe it's beyond. She took her arm from his shoulders. Jonas, she said, speaking not to him alone, but to the entire community of which he was a part, you will be trained to be our next receiver of memory. We thank you for your childhood. Then she turned and left the stage, left him there alone, standing and facing the crowd, which began spontaneously, the collective murmur of his name, Jonas. It was a whisper at first, hushed, barely audible, Jonas, Jonas. Then louder, faster, Jonas, Jonas, Jonas. Or maybe it was Jonas, Jonas, Jonas. With the chant, Jonas knew the community was accepting him and his new role, giving him life the way they had given it to the new child, Caleb. His heart swelled with gratitude, thankfulness, and pride. But at the same time, he filled with fear. He did not know what his selection meant. He did not know what he was to become, or what would become of him. He just had so many questions with the unknown. So many things he just doesn't know. So, let's see. How is Jonas characterized in ways that are similar to and different from his community? Oh, I skipped. I'm sorry. That was a question That's a question that I'm gonna probably pick up later, because I've went 25 minutes and I don't really like to go that far. But number 9, I'm trying to pull up. I want us to do number 9 and 10, and then I'm gonna let you go, okay? Number 9, why must Jonas have courage and bravery to be the receiver, according to the chief elder? What did they say he was going to have to grapple with? What did they say he was going to have to endure a great amount of? That's why he's got to have the courage and the bravery. And what does this suggest about people in the community? They're not going to be able to relate. Not that he's going to be able to talk to them. I mean, if he's basically the leader. He's going to basically be the leader in many regards. Some way, somehow. He's really, if he's the most honored, he's going to experience things that he can't share or something. He's going to have to experience pain. It says you're going to experience pain that nobody has ever, they can't comprehend it. They're not going to be able to even really comprehend the level of pain. That's why he's got to be brave. But they're confident because they've watched him, and they know that he's smart and he's got all these attributes that they're looking for. And his ability to see beyond, and his integrity, and the fact that when he got in trouble, he was, his courage, his intelligence, and his integrity, his wisdom that will be developed. And number 10, what happens to convince Jonas that he has that capacity? It's almost like, and I kind of got a little bit animated, which I am. I'm that way anyway. But when she's standing there saying, you have this gift, and he's going, I don't know what you're talking about, because, I mean, at the time, he really doesn't know. In his mind, I could just imagine that he's thinking, you got the wrong one. And he had enough sense to know this is a massive, major assignment. And if he doesn't say something, quick, not that you would disrespect the authority, but if he really thought that he didn't have it, that was his moment to say something. But just as he was feeling that way, as he looked out on the audience and he could see something changed, we don't know what changed, but we could tell by the description that it was similar to that apple. Something changed really quick in a glance. It was the same type of thing, and it gave him that assurance that he needed. Okay. So his ability to see beyond, and that gave him that what would you call that? Assurance that. And here's the thing: he's only 11. He's just turning 12. So adults can see something inside of you sometimes that you can't see in yourself. Maybe a potential that you have, a gift, a calling, a purpose, a destiny. Let someone speak into your life. And then that's a good thing, And so he just didn't. He didn't know himself. He didn't really know. He's still trying to discover himself, because he's just young. So that's where we're going to leave it. So okay, so I'm at 30 minutes. So whatever else is on the Google Doc, whatever else is on there for lesson 8, just take a good look at it. And if you have any questions, just send those in. And if I'll do the best I can, and I'm Look, we're just trying to get through this, but I am enjoying it. I really am. So I hope you are too.